AI this, AI that. I feel like AI is the conversation that everybody's having, whether it be in business, whether it be in school, whether it be with family and friends at the dinner table. It's the conversation that's eloping or engaging everybody. And today we're talking about AI in music creation and essentially music release, the process of creation to release, and how you can utilize it without essentially it taking over and taking away from the actual music and creative process, but enhancing it. And one of the examples I like to think about is I do a lot of photo and video editing, and obviously for YouTube, but also I have a business where I work with clients. And that being said, one of the things that I've noticed a tremendous difference in 10 years ago versus today is how AI has changed the editing process, where, for example, now I just click a single button, and it highlights the whole person, and I could make that person brighter or darker or more colored, or you could highlight a certain object, and it completely it isolates that object, and you could either delete it or you could change it. Do you know how much work that would have taken 10 years ago? It completely changed the way we edit and how fast you edit, the efficiency of editing, and that whole process. And I think that could be applied to all creative spaces, where it's not changing the way I'm doing the work. I still would have done that work in the past. It just makes it significantly more efficient. So that being said, we're talking about a couple different ways AI can be used to make essentially you more efficient, even honestly potentially better quality work, right? Where I might not have had the capabilities or even the time to do that work in the past. For example, going back to that photo and video concept, where now I have the time because I'm able to process these things in a much faster, much more efficient, and honestly higher quality way. First thing we're talking about is potentially sample making. I just discovered this plugin through Waves. It's called Illusion, or Illusion, however you want to pronounce it. But essentially, you type something in, and you type a prompt like you would into any AI software like ChatGPT, and you type a prompt of what you want the sound to sound like, whether it be like a piano that sounds like it's, I don't know, out of tune in space. And it'll create a sample based on that prompt. And it's a really interesting idea, because sampling has been around, since the 70s, 80s, where you would take a portion of somebody's music and you can potentially manipulate it or just use it as is, whether it be like as simple as a snare drum sound, all the way to like the chorus of a song. And then people pitch that. I typically hear that a lot in hip hop music. People will then pitch that up and use that as their chorus of their song, right? That's sampling. It's been around for a long time. Now you can get into the whole argument of, is that wrong? Is it not wrong? But you're essentially using somebody else's creation in your own work, right? So how is it different now if we're using AI's creation, right? There's a lot of softwares out there now where sample companies, where you can now download pre-made samples that they've made. Now you're not even making the music, you're downloading it and you're creating with their music. Now, what if you had a little bit more control over it, where you can now say, hey, I want this sample to be made, and you don't have to hire the musician to make it, right? You could have AI make it. It's a really interesting tool where, I'm not saying you make the whole song through that, but if you want, like, for example, a specific sound, and maybe that's one sound out of the 60 sounds or 5 sounds out of the 100 sounds you have going on in your song, I think it's a pretty interesting tool, as opposed to necessarily a crutch or a problem in the music industry. It's not necessarily taking the heart out of it. It's just creating efficiency and creating new opportunities in the industry. The second one I want to talk about is mixing tools. Now, this one really ties heavily into the idea of what I was talking about with the photo editing, where like you can highlight a person very easily, as opposed to you used to have to draw all the way around the person. If you messed up, you had to start all over. It was a nightmare. Very similarly with the music industry, now there's a lot of options with mixing, and essentially AI can hear certain things in your mix and highlight, for example, like, to some degree, it's not necessarily AI, but the technology of parametric EQs, where you can now see what is coming through the equalizer, as opposed to back in the day, you just had to use your ears. Now you can actually see the frequencies that are coming through, and you can mix based on those frequencies that you're seeing. You can see where the peaks are and everything. AI is another tool that you can use to, for example, with compression or even certain EQs. There's a lot of options there's a lot of plugins out there where you can say, hey, this is an acoustic guitar, and then it'll listen to the rest of your track, and it'll mix that acoustic guitar based on what it sounds like, what it thinks the other track needs, if it needs more high end or low end. Again, you don't necessarily want to use it as a crutch, but it could be a great starting point. Wow, this sounds so much better than before. Okay, let me make a couple adjustments. So that's the second one. Piggybacking on that would be mastering. I've talked about this in plenty of other videos, but there's a ton of services out there with AI mastering, and I jumped on this bandwagon almost a decade ago, before AI was really even a conversation, which is wild that it's been around that long. So there's plenty of softwares out there and plenty of different services. For example, Distrokid has one. It's called Mixia, and the way it works is you upload your track, and it analyzes the track based on the sound of the song, and then it'll serve you something back where it gives you the options of, okay, here, do you want more of this? Do you want less of this? Do you want more bass? Do you want more compression? And then it masters a song, and it's amazing. And I really like it, one, because it's convenient. I don't have to bother going back and forth with emails and files with somebody that masters, because it becomes really cumbersome really quickly, particularly if you're one prone to making a lot of changes in your mixes. But then you can see what it sounds like in the mastering process as you're going along, and get a better idea for your mix as you're mixing. So if you're interested in checking that out, DistroKid, obviously you can release when the song's ready to be released, you can release your music through them, but they also have their mastering software that you can use as well, which I think is a really, really cool software. But check it out. There's a link down below. The fourth one is one that I kind of want to explore a little bit more, and that's album art. This is, again, kind of as you're in the process of releasing music. I don't think people really care about album art anymore. You're not walking into a record store where you're like kind of perusing, or like, remember like Blockbuster used to pick a movie based on the cover of the VHS or the DVD. Kind of similarly with album covers back in the day, you used to look at the album cover and the photos and see if it was interesting to you. Nobody's really doing it anymore. It's all like algorithmic based and like stuff like that. So I don't think album art is super important. Yes, it could be a way to express yourself, but it's not super important to people hearing your music. So I've just been using Canva and doing some pretty simple stuff with the name of the song and some colors and stuff. But like, it'd be interesting to give AI a shot at that, and one, speed up the process, but two, kind of get ideas that are a little more outside of your own, and essentially using like a partner, right? These are all just ideas and all tips, and I think they all can be ways that AI can be a tool in your tool belt without it necessarily taking over the company, right? So I'd love to know your opinion. Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and if you're interested in checking out DistroKid to release your music, to use Mixia, or they also have access to something called DistroVid, where you can release your music videos and get them on Vivo. So many different things. There's a link down below.